Good morning. Wonderful to see you all. So again, I'm your brand new president, Marcia McNutt, and this is my first address to you all. So as we all gather for the 154th meeting of the National Academy of Sciences, we're here to celebrate new members, new medalists, and new scientific insights. This meeting resembles, in many ways, numerous Academy celebrations that have preceded it. As your new president, I've come to appreciate the importance of the history and the traditions of this venerated institution, and my role in protecting and strengthening them. I have also felt it my duty in this position to work forthrightly to counter any negative trends concerning science and the scientific enterprise. The benefits from science, unfolding across every aspect of society, were made possible by decades of sustained investment in basic research. Even greater discoveries will emerge in the years ahead if America sustains and strengthens, not weakens, its support for science. Discovery is still increasing at an accelerating rate. Vannevar Bush's endless frontier is still alive and well. The promise of science that President Lincoln and the founders of the Academy envisioned in 1863 is being realized in ways that would gratify them and that underscores their prescience in establishing the Academy. New fields of science are still emerging. New scientific questions are being pursued at the boundaries of well-established disciplines. And the convergence of disciplines is yielding new insights and astounding revelations of new knowledge. The American pioneering spirits in science and the American sense of exploration and discovery are as vibrant as ever. We don't always get it right the first time, but science is fundamentally a self-correcting institution. Americans understand this, and survey results, as shown here in this slide, show consistently that Americans hold science and scientists in the highest regard, more so than most other human pursuits and professions. Now, despite my optimism about science, I do see major storm clouds on the horizon. Fundamental changes sweeping the nation and the world, and new norms to which we must adjust. Business as usual is not a viable option for the Academy in the near future if we are to fulfill our mission and remain a relevant institution. I've spent my time here since assuming the office of president, listening to all of you during the many regional meetings that were conducted at institutions across the U.S. and abroad. And here's the list of the regional meetings that have been conducted in my first year here. So this morning, I'd like to talk to you about how I see the changing national and international situation, how the Academy needs to better position itself so as to meet our mission and remain relevant. Let's start with socio-economic trends. My father worked from his first day to his last at 144 Glenwood Avenue in Minneapolis, where his father worked before him and his father before him. In contrast, two of my daughters worked in industries that did not even exist on the day they were born, and one in a market that she herself created. Students today need to become lifelong learners because they will likely have 4 or 5 different jobs and will constantly need to upgrade their skills to be prepared for the next opportunity. We need to think how the national academies can periodically scan for emerging career paths and shape training programs that transition workers to those new careers with minimal disruption to their daily lives. Of particular concern is the segment of the workforce that never attended college and is rapidly being displaced by robotics, disruptive technologies, and international competition. It is tragic to see in the news the plight of unemployed factory workers and miners, and then hear how the solar industry cannot find enough qualified people to hire. How can the academies best help displaced workers so that they qualify for good-paying technical jobs in modern industries? An example of a report that the National Academies has in progress to meet this challenge is one called Building America's Skilled Technical Workforce, which will be released later this month. Another socioeconomic trend is the gap in wealth inequality. And this was my favorite illustration of it. It shows if we translated inequality in the US to land ownership, how it would be distributed. The 1% would own the West, 9% would own the East, and the remaining 90% would own the South. So if you're in the 1% and you're a family of 4, you'd have 1,300 acres of land in the Western US. This inequality gap has been widening in recent decades, both here and in some European nations. Inequality was an important topic of mutual interest at a recent meeting between the officers of the National Academy of Sciences and the Royal Society in London. It becomes easier to understand the rise of populism in so many nations around the world and the readiness to believe that immigrants are the source of the problem when a growing fraction of citizens are concerned that economic opportunity is leaving them behind. Forbes reported last year that 63% of Americans would be unable to come up with an extra $500 if their car broke down, or the refrigerator gave out, or some other unexpected emergency required immediate cash. Science is not the root of this growing inequality, but I do believe we can use the tools of science to help seek solutions. At our meeting with the Royal Society, the officers prepared a joint statement expressing our commitment to work together to seek solutions so that science continues to deliver public good that benefits all, not just the top 1%. An excellent example of an academy study that is aligned with this goal is the American Opportunity Study, an ambitious tracking of economic, educational, and occupational mobility across and within generations. It will answer the question, is the American dream still alive? And if so, who is breaking free from disadvantaged origins today? And how are they doing it? In addition to these socioeconomic issues, many of which are shared internationally, numerous other global challenges are common threats that science can address. Aging population, root causes of terrorism, climate change, pandemic diseases. The National Academy believes that at a time when our own government appears to be signaling a retreat from international alliances, it is important for us to increase our international visibility, to assert that U.S. science is still vibrant and willing to assume leadership. We have worked with international partners on science input to the G7 summit on topics such as neurodegenerative diseases, preserving cultural heritage in the face of war and natural disasters, and the importance of science and technology to economic growth. We also delivered a statement to the G20 summit on global health, combating communicable and non-communicable diseases. Along with the Russian Academy of Sciences and the French Academy, we are organizing workshops on the roots of violent extremism. and we have continued our very successful bilateral and trilateral Frontiers of Science programs that allow our young scientists to exchange insights with counterparts abroad. Closer to home, we've also been making progress lately in reaching out to the new administration. This administration is off to an historically slow start in terms of political appointments. And for that reason, the administration's science policy is still forming. However, this delay provides an unusually large window of time for the Academy to help shape the administration's key science appointments. Here's a list of the appointments still to be filled. The only ones that are not on here are mostly the ones in economics. I've had several meetings with the key White House science advisor to build a relationship and discuss these opportunities. The National Academy presidents, together with staff and volunteer leadership, met with the senior White House advisor for several hours for a frank conversation about science and the new administration. This meeting was an important step in opening up a constructive line of communication with someone very close to the president. We all left the meeting with a much better understanding of how the academies can be helpful. For example, this administration may choose to remain leaner than previous administrations in terms of policy personnel. If so, it could provide an opportunity for the academies to help fill some gaps. We are working on finding qualified individuals to fill the many important government posts that remain vacant, as well as for ideas for major science initiatives that would advance human knowledge and contribute to the President's stated priorities of national security, American competitiveness, and better health care. In terms of working with the new administration, I expect that we will see an acceleration of two trends already apparent with previous administrations. The first is budgetary. While federal sponsors value our consensus reports most highly, when federal budgets are tight, they become cost-conscious. The second is timeliness. The tenure of political appointees has been decreasing, such that the average is now 18 to 24 months. Therefore, it is no wonder that few senior administrators would want to wait 2 years for one of our consensus reports to be delivered, just as he or she is leaving office. For these reasons and others, the National Academy of Engineering President Dan Mote, National Academy of Medicine President Victor Zhao, and I have initiated the first ever external review of the National Research Council. The charge to the review panel is to determine how we can better execute our mission in a time of tightening government budgets and accelerating timelines. There are some obvious targets to consider. Would synchronizing processes and platforms across NRC divisions streamline support costs? Does reducing the downtime between committee meetings use staff time more efficiently and deliver reports faster? Can we harness state-of-the-art technology for committee interaction, document production, and dissemination of results as befits a 21st century scientific organization? Would there be unintended consequences of altering the status quo that we need to worry about? The review got underway in March and is being conducted by NAPA, the National Academy of Public Administration. The members of the panel who will oversee the review are drawn from members of the 3 academies and from the roster of NAPA fellows. And here's the review committee. I'm grateful to the Sloan Foundation for supporting the costs of the review. The panel intends to deliver its recommendations at the end of the year, and I look forward to sharing them all with you. I would add that this review is just one of the many ways that the 3 academies are working very closely together in a way that would not have been possible before the IOM became the NAM. It has truly been a pleasure to work in close collaboration with Dan Mote at the NAE and Victor Zhao at the NAM to ensure a consistent position of the 3 academies on issues important to the American research community. Another example of how we are working together is that we are jointly appointing a committee to advise the three presidents to help us further the application of convergence research approaches to the many issues beyond just the biomedical sciences that would benefit from this way of thinking. While changes to our report operations at the Academy await the outcome of the NAPA review, in the meantime, we are moving briskly ahead with updating our conflict of interest policy, which brings me to the broader issue of integrity in science. As you well know, in science, the issue of integrity is everything. The Academy must be at the forefront of efforts to ensure that the rigor and integrity of the scientific enterprise is upheld above all else. Examples of our recent efforts in this regard are last month's three-day Sackler Colloquium on the topic of reproducibility. That was followed by the release of a new Academy's report on integrity in research. It calls for establishing a new nonprofit and independent advisory board to promote research integrity across all sectors and disciplines as its core mission. The report also recommends stronger actions against practices detrimental to research that are on the borderline of misconduct. Because the scientific method is the most reliable generator of knowledge in the world we live in, we, as the Academy, have a responsibility to do everything possible to nurture the self-correcting nature of science and to safeguard the public's trust in it. To that end, I've asked for our own policies and procedures to be reviewed with an eye toward constant improvement. Having been a committee member, like many of you, I know firsthand the rigor of the consensus study process here, including the value that has been added by the final careful check from the report review committee. But just like with the broader scientific enterprise, I believe we should always be looking for ways to evolve, and maintaining the highest levels of scientific integrity is clearly paramount to our ability to provide unbiased advice. In particular, our guidance for revising our conflict of interest policies has its origin from a 2015 gathering at the Annenberg Retreat at Sunnylands, originated by Ralph Cicerone, where a small group of Academy members discussed how to bolster incentives to the highest standards of scientific integrity and maintain the historically high trust of the public in the scientific profession. Following on the recommendations of that retreat, which were published in Science, we can begin by using more neutral language. The term conflict of interest implies that all relationships are necessarily corruptive. We suggest replacing it with disclosure of relevant relationships to encourage more complete disclosure from all parties. We have strengthened our procedures for reviewing staff relationships, are now looking more systematically at whether nonprofit organizations that support our studies are being funded by corporations or others with a stake in the outcome, and will disclose unavoidable conflicts of study committee members in a more transparent manner in the committee's report. We are also examining the extent to which we should take past as well as current activities and relationships into account in determining if a potential committee member is conflicted, and whether the long-standing dollar threshold that triggers a financial disclosure is still appropriate. Now, I'm very excited to tell you about two other initiatives we are launching here at the National Academy of Sciences. Both are intended to improve our science engagement with the public in light of concerns that respect for evidence in decision-making is waning and acceptance for alternative facts is waxing. The first is the development of the Koshland Public Engagement Program. This new program is an important evolution in the mission of the museum recommended by a review committee chaired by National Academy member Vicki Chandler. It's been supported by the Koshland Foundation and endorsed by our council. Our plan is to build on the success of the Koshland Science Museum by expanding its reach through online platforms to involve a much larger audience than those we reach with the current traffic into the Keck Center. To complement these virtual interactions, we will provide more accessible and visible face-to-face group activities. So here's an example of a very successful online engagement activity that was on Extreme Events. We will also have displays and science open houses here in the main Academy building that's right off the mall, as well as in other venues. The March for Science that happened the past weekend provided a wonderful opportunity to test drive a Saturday open house here in this very building. We had a great response. Here's one group that came through. With Albert Einstein outside to lure people to our door, we had just shy of 500 visitors in the space of a few hours. I loved one future scientist even noticed the solar panels on the roof of the East Court outside the lecture room. Ralph would have been so proud, as he loved those solar panels. A second initiative we are launching is tentatively entitled America Asks, Science Answers. We will be surveying Americans on what contemporary questions they would like answered. Impact of fracking, safety of GMOs, the practicality of carbon sequestration. The answers are generally found in our peer-reviewed consensus reports, but generally they're not found in a format that the American public can find easily, nor that a non-scientist might necessarily understand or extract. Furthermore, most Americans don't know to even go to our reports in the first place to get those answers. Using our reports, professional writers will prepare responses to these questions. They will write them up for the lay public and post them in an attractive series of web pages. Here's an example of the sort of style of web pages that were previously prepared for the topic of energy. As part of the outreach for the project, we plan to incorporate this material into Wikipedia articles, which is the place many Americans turn to for answers, and to other digital media with the dual objectives of providing authoritative information and raising the visibility of our work. The ultimate goal is to ensure that the Academy be a portal for those seeking knowledge. These new initiatives obviously require new resources. You will all hear in an upcoming appeals about the need for us to increase our participation rate in the Academy's annual fund. As many of you know from the other membership organizations you support, the percentage of members who contribute to the annual fund is a benchmark that foundations and outside donors use to gauge member confidence in the importance of the mission of the organization. Currently, the National Academy of Sciences participation rate is below 20%. And actually, I look with envy at the participation rate at the NAE and the NAM. With anticipated challenges in federal funding in the foreseeable future, increasing sources of non-federal funding is more important now than ever before. I'm very grateful to those members of the Academy and friends of the Academy who have already given generously. The ability of the Academy to respond to new challenges and launch studies on pressing issues of the day is underpinned by flexible support from the annual fund and from our endowment. This last year has seen tremendous support from donations to the endowment fund established by Ralph and Carol Cicerone, and the Simons Foundation's $10 million challenge grant to match gifts to that fund. I'm grateful to Jim and Marilyn Simons and the many members, friends, and foundations who have supported this fund that strengthens the Academy and honors Ralph's service. Finally, I want to mention the wonderful Kavli gift. The Kavli Foundation has generously pledged $10.5 million to establish an unrestricted endowment to the National Academy of Sciences. And in recognition of this extraordinary gift, we have named the auditorium for Fred Kavli. Fred was a wonderful friend to the Academy and actually to all of science. All of the initiatives I've just mentioned, such as more effectively providing advice to the nation, increasing our international profile, elevating scientific integrity, expanding public engagement, and more effectively disseminating our work through America Asks Science Answers, will benefit from the Kavli Foundation's gift and the additional funds it will generate under the terms of the Simons Foundation's match. Now, before I pass the podium over to Rock Hankin, Chairman of the Board of the Kavli Foundation, to say a few more words about its work in connection to the Academy, I have a brief presentation to make. As I mentioned in the beginning, the National Academy of Sciences has existed for 154 years. For almost 30% of the entire history of the Academy, there's been one constant, and that is Ken Fulton. You all know him. He all knows you. He has served the Academy faithfully for 45 years of those 154 years, rising to the indispensable post of Executive Director. It only seemed fitting to me that I present him with his 45-year service award in the company of all of you, the members he serves, so that we can all thank him for his tireless efforts on behalf of the National Academy of Sciences. So Ken. And now I'd like to invite Ron Hankin to the stage on behalf of the Kavli Foundation.
I became Bob Kahn. Good morning. On behalf of the Kavli Foundation, let me thank you, Marcia, for your gracious and meaningful remarks. Naming this auditorium at the National Academies for Fred Kavli, founder and benefactor of the Kavli Foundation, is a singular way to honor a man who committed all that came with the successes of his life to advancing science. It is very meaningful that Fred Kavli's name will forever be associated with the National Academies of Science, an institution created by Congress and signed into law by President Lincoln, and that for over 150 years has symbolized science and all its potential. This auditorium, where people gather to hear ideas and engage in excitement and importance of science, as you will be doing today, is a place that Fred himself would have enjoyed greatly. Fred Kavli is an American success story. He immigrated here from Norway. He formed Kavlico as an entrepreneur, and he funded it by the simple expedient of advertising for investors. By the way, you cannot do that now. He used advanced science and technology to develop Kavlico into one of the world's most successful transducer manufacturers, and then, through prudent investing and timely harvesting, accumulated great wealth during his lifetime. What he did with the fruits of his success is why we are here today. In 2000, Fred formed the Kavli Foundation. The founding story includes consulting with several members of this academy about an approach to supporting and facilitating basic research. Fred recognized how vital Science is to all of us and the lives we lead. He understood that the health and well-being of our nation, and indeed the world, depends in large part on advancing science, and he was particularly believing in supporting fundamental research, whose benefit might not be realized quickly, maybe not even in one's own lifetime. What developed as a result is a unique approach to scientific philanthropy. There are now 20 Kavli Institutes at leading universities in cosmology, theoretical physics, neuroscience, and nanoscience. And these endowments provide entirely discretionary funds, endowments provide entirely discretionary funds. All of these institutes are becoming more and more interconnected. The Kavli Prize, which has been awarded to several NAS members, among others, support for scientific societies and programs, and then seminars and convocations and salons addressing cutting-edge issues in the fields of science we support. That has led, in part, to the BRAIN Initiative, among other initiatives. Fred felt especially fortunate. His grave marker says, "Thanks for everything." His foundation, the Kavli Foundation, is his enduring expression of that thanks. This honor, naming the National Academy's primary auditorium for Fred in recognition of our establishing the Fred Kavli Endowment Fund at the National Academy of Science, providing the National Academy of Sciences with discretionary funds, would have pleased Fred greatly, as he recognizes the success of his efforts to support basic science and the betterment of all humanity. This Fred Kavli Auditorium will forever be a place where the curious can meet, and as Fred would have wanted, ensure the benefits of science do not go unnoticed. Fred is not here to express his appreciation for this honor. As chairman of the board of the Kavli Foundation, I do on his behalf.
So now they can turn on the slide. I'm Bob Kahn, President and CEO of the Kavli Foundation. We are delighted by this gift to the Academy for the reasons that Rock has just expressed. And I want to thank Marcia for her very gracious remarks as she opened this session. I thought I would tell you a little bit about how we actually go about implementing a vision that began with Fred and we continue with the board and staff today. So the very first slide, and I guess I have to use a clicker, and is that the clicker? So where's the clicker that makes you? The green button. There you go. So that's Fred Kavli in the office that he built for himself at the headquarters in Oxnard, California. We're moving the headquarters to Los Angeles, but this was shot in his office. And I only want to comment that you'll notice the wood in the background and the portrait that sits outside against the wood that characterizes much of this building. The contrast is remarkable, and this is a remarkable portrait of Fred. As Rock said, Fred passed away in 2013, and he left all of his assets to the foundation for this purpose, to advance science for the benefit of humanity, to promote public understanding of scientific research, and I think very importantly, support scientists in their work. The recognition of that support is really critical. And we do that through a series of programs that have been alluded to. Rock mentioned the Kavli Prize and the Kavli Institutes. Let me just say the red circles represent the science programs, and the blue circles represent our programs for public understanding and public outreach. You had Alan Alda's name mentioned already. We have been, for many years, basic supporters of the Alda Center at Stony Brook. Just commenting, we have 20 institutes, as Rock mentioned, in astrophysics, nanoscience, neuroscience, and theoretical physics. And I might remark that I think there are probably 5 or 8 or 10 directors or members of Kavli Institutes who are in the audience and members. Maybe they could just stand and you can see who is here from the Kavli Institutes. There we go. And welcome, and I'm glad you're here. And I want to point out that the 3 key leadership team of the Academy is here. Maybe Eric, David, and Myung, you would stand, please. They make it happen. Thank you. So the Kavli Institutes are the largest of our programs by far. The Kavli Prize is a partnership with the Norwegian Academy of Science and Letters, and very interestingly, yesterday you gave one of the Academy's prize to 2 people from Norway, one of whom chairs the Astrophysics Prize Committee. But we partner with you in that way, in that the Academy nominates jurors for the Kavli Prize selection committees, along with the French Academy, the Royal Society, the Max Planck Society, the Chinese Academy, and of course the Norwegian Academy of Sciences. And that prize is $1 million in each of the 3 areas. It's given biennially, and it's awarded by the King of Norway in a remarkable set of a week for science, September every even year. Comment was made about the BRAIN initiative, and I did want to point out, you'll see that we have meetings programs as one of the major activities that we have instituted, particularly over the last 6 or 8 years. And that program itself has produced some remarkable outcomes, the most remarkable clearly being the meeting that was held at the Kavli Royal Society Center, which is another program we've supported in September of 2011. And the question was simply, or maybe not so simply, what are the opportunities at the intersection of nanoscience and neuroscience? And we gathered about 40 people, at least 2/3 from the United States, even though the meeting was held in the UK. And it was from that meeting that a core group of 5, great debate, felt that there was the possibility over the next couple of decades of mapping the functioning brain. Not mapping the static brain, mapping the functioning brain. Over the next 18 months, the foundation supported a series of meetings. The community itself really gathered itself into a storm, grew over time, and we found ourselves in the East Room of the White House 18 months later with President Obama announcing the BRAIN Initiative. And since then, the enhancement of funding, net new, for neuroscience in the United States has been nothing short of astounding. So that's the kind of impact that can be had. It was mentioned that we had many advisors, Fred had many advisors at the start of the foundation, and I wanted to particularly honor and recognize Ralph Cicerone. Ralph was chancellor at UC Irvine. We knew each other because we were both part of the UC system. He was an advisor to Fred early on. And the very first programs that we began doing with the National Academy of Sciences were the result of Ralph coming to the Academy as its president. It made an enormous difference in enabling a partnership that continues to this day. So let me just tell you those partnerships, and I'll bring this to a close. The Frontiers of Science program was mentioned by Marcia. That became the Kavli Frontiers of Science program in 2005. It's a remarkable program that is not just national but international. And it had a 10-year horizon. We got to the 8th or 9th year, and we had a very interesting conversation, a very positive one. And so that'll go on for another 10 years at least, and then we'll address it again in a decade. So this program continues. We made an initial catalytic gift, not unlike the catalytic effect of our meetings program, to Ralph and the Academy in 2006 to jumpstart what became the America's Energy Futures activity, which ran for 3 years and produced a whole series of very important reports that guided the government with respect to energy policy. We have provided some resources to help you celebrate, help our Academy, I'm part of it too, help the Academy celebrate the 150th anniversary in 2013. And convergence has been mentioned. It was mentioned by Francis Arnold yesterday. Phil Sharp has been very involved in that, who's also a member of the National Academy. And we have been partnering with the Academy and trying to move the notions of what goes on in convergent science forward for you. And here are a couple of the reports. The one on the right is a National Academy report that we've published jointly between the Foundation and the Academy. And finally, we're here today. So this is now the Fred Kavli Auditorium. I think everything that Fred envisioned for his legacy to enhance science is served by the recognition here. And most importantly, it's a glorious day certainly for Fred Kavli. It is a glorious day for us at the Kavli Foundation. I think it's a glorious day, frankly, for our Academy because the resources, as Brock and Marcia have both remarked about, there are no constraints. So the payout every year from the endowment will be available to the president, to the council, to the Academy for your view of the highest and best use of those resources. And we all know that is the most irreplaceable of resources. So we are pleased and proud that this will now forever be known as the Fred Kavli Auditorium at the National Academy of Sciences. Thank you very much.